Now, given that your specialty is your client coach relationship, I definitely want to come back to that. But I'm more interested, mate, in how you end up getting into academia for health and fitness. Is it do you start coaching and you start to notice particular things and you kind of look for quantifiable research to prove to yourself that things are right and realize it's not there and put your hand up to be that person, or what's the
Not specifically me, but there is certain observations you make once you are in academia on what's happening outside of academia. And one of the handbrakes of academia is that a coach's laboratory is the gym, and they'll try stuff and they'll see what works and what doesn't work, and then they'll find something that works. And then the researchers will come along and go, okay, well, let's work out what the mechanisms are for how this actually works and either prove it right or prove it wrong. But then by the time it gets published, it's a year, 2 years down the track, and then the actual coaches have moved on to something else. So it's not exactly how I got into it, but you definitely see that once you are in academia, um, how coaches tend to be sort of more ahead of the curve, and then science catches up.
Yeah, yeah. And your story specifically, how did you end up in the CPU?
That's a whole podcast by itself, but I'll give you the synopsis. Um, I was one of those high school kids that was like, no, I'm never going to university. No, it's not for me. And at the time, I was about 17 when I discovered Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then kind of was trying to. This is 2002, and I was trying to pave my way into cage fighting. That was kind of what my athletic goal was. And long story short, like I coached BJJ, I coached boxing, I had a handful of boxing matches, trained in all the facets of MMA, but never actually got to get in the cage. So I had a couple of three fights signed, and then different things happened, and a guy got injured, the other guy got injured. One of the organisations signed us, and they went bankrupt before we even got in the ring and stuff like that. But then fast forward about sort of 9-10 years after that, I was a part-time nightclub bouncer. So I had a 9 to 5, so that would pay for my training, and I could recover during the day in my office job and sort of train before. And that was kind of what got me into strength and conditioning. Was that I wasn't a great athlete, so I had to control what I could control, and one of those biggest things was obviously my conditioning. And then, so as one night as a nightclub bouncer, some bloke decided he didn't like the look at the back of my head. Most people don't like the look at the front of my head, but he decided to put some brass knuckles in the back of my head. And we had a bit of a scuffle following that. But the end result for me was four damaged vertebrae in my neck and one in my lumbar spine. So that kind of put the handbrake on my athletic goals. And basically, I tried to get back to fighting fit. There's a big difference between being like training fit and fighting fit, and I was never able to get back to fighting fit. So transitioned more towards coaching than my actual training itself. And from there, I was looking. I'd done my PT course sort of at that point. Was moving towards like a PT within an athletic performance specialization, and bumped into a guy in the gym who came into the boxing class that I was an assistant coach of. Jumped on the pads with him. He was new. He happened to be Melbourne Rebels' first strength conditioning coach. And then from him, I needed to do my placement hours for ASCA, and asked him if I could come down the Rebels, and he was going to ask me to come down the Rebels and do some combat conditioning with them, so boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, stuff like that with them in the preseason.
Yeah.
And so that experience sort of became the first point of my taste the elite environment. And then from there, it was, how do I get in this as a job? Like, what do I have to do to have this as my career? So by this point, I was about 27. They were like, you need a master's degree. I was like, cool, what's a master's degree? Like, well, you need a bachelor's degree. And I was like, cool, what's a bachelor's degree? So ended up 3 years at Big Uni doing a Bachelor of Coaching. So that's my undergrad in coaching with a major in sports science. From there, during that time, you meet people along the way, and I ended up at Martin Gervin's gym. So Marty at the time was Collingwood Magpie strength conditioning coach, and he's been a powerlifter for 30 odd years, whatever it was. And I wanted to work under him and learn under him. And during that time, I was meeting these elite athletes. We've got Olympians coming in out of the gym. We've got AFL players. We've got NRL players. but Marty doesn't advertise, so it's all very word of mouth. So I'm sitting there going, well, why him? Like, how do these people, like, what's that decision making process of choosing him as a coach? And that was kind of what planted the seed. So I went on to do a master's degree. My actual career goal was to go work in the collegiate system in America. So I leveraged my master's degree to go over there and do that. And I spent a semester over at University of Michigan. Same thing in there. Like, I was sitting around the gym one day, and there's a window where like student athletes aren't allowed in the gym. And I was sitting there, and we had 3 Major League Baseball players that were former Michigan students that would just come back to use the gym. I was like, well, if you got all the money in the world, all the time in the world, in your off season, why do you go back to your university? And so I came to the end of my time at Michigan. And it was like, well, do you want to stay? Like, what's your kind of career plan? Would you move to America? And by that point, I was kind of like more interested in that coach-athlete relationship and researching that, and doing some more research sort of into it. No one's really looked in that space within strength and conditioning. So there's research done in coach-athlete relationships, and there's research done in strength and conditioning, but no one's looked at that bridge between the two, and specifically from the athlete's point of view. And that was kind of the area that I was like, this is what I want to go figure this part out. So that was my kind of pathway into academia. Was basically, no one else has done this, so it might as well be me if no one else has done it.
Yeah, yeah. That's a heck of a journey, mate.
It's about halfway through, I reckon.
um, yeah, that is a heck of. And then, so if you kind of look forward from this point, are you still feel like the academia element is something to potentially concrete your ideas moving forward as a coach, or is it now like, no, no, this is a different trajectory now that I'm on to follow forward for other coaches more so, right?
For me, it's a lot about um, coaching coaches now, so that whatever kind of like we can do in the education space is always to improve athlete performance. So if we can better upskill coaches to build better relationships are going to become more successful athletes, which is the end point, is
Yeah.
always, can we improve sport performance?
Yeah. So what's at the foundation? Trust, essentially, right?
Well, you got to build the trust.
Yeah.
That's the hard part. So, well, one of the hard parts. The foundation, really, what it comes down to is knowing the athlete and what we call prolonged engagement, which is the time frame it takes to actually build a relationship. If you in non-sporting context, if you look at marriage and like research in that relationship space, prolonged engagement is about 2 years if you live together and 3 years if you don't. So no one's really looked at that area within like strength and conditioning or within sport coaching. So we've got to borrow from other areas and look at foundations relationships. So it's really comes down to knowing the athlete, and the only way to really know the athlete is to spend time with them. More importantly than that, or like a layer on top of that, is you have to actually, like, number one, care. Like, you actually have to. It's an athlete-centered relationship. Like, you need to be there. It's not about you. It's about the athlete. And if you've always got that underpinning your decision making, then you're going to be a good coach. But part of that is knowing the athlete beyond their sport, and then that creates a bit of a loop. So you're working with an athlete, and you're not. I'll take like a footballer for example, an Australian rules footballer, and they come in your gym on Monday morning. You're not saying to them, "Hey, you did really well on the weekend. You kicked 6 goals. You got 10 tackles. You did this. You did that." It's like, "Hey, how your dog's going? Hey, did you get it in the surf on the weekend?" Like those things beyond sport.
Yeah.
That way, we're treating them as people. We're not treating them as athletes.
Yeah. It sounds like the evolution, ironically, could go the other way, where there's probably a lot that, like the marriage relationship kind of research can again then take from sort of what you're doing too, right? Because I mean, I guess that's the foundation of any relationship, is you try to get the best out of the other person and out of yourself too, right? Vice versa. Yeah.
What the actual history of sport coaching like relationships from a sport coach, as in like a football coach, basketball coach, not an S&C coach, is pretty interesting, and it's kind of parallel with society in back in the 70s, it was very authoritarian, whereas this, like what the coach says, is it. So a lot of the research was on what a coach is doing, and that was it. And then over time, it's shifted towards, well, what do athletes need? And then the technical name is called a dyadic, or a dyad, which is very similar to a marriage in that you've got two people and they're working together to achieve whatever it is goals they're working towards. And within the athletic performance context, that's usually, or in an elite athletic performance context, that's the Super Bowl, that's the Olympic gold medal, that's the mutual goal. And then there's obviously goal setting along the way, but the athlete and the coach have to have a mutual goal. They have to be working towards something that they both understand, um, both of them are working towards. So absolutely, you can put that into any relationship context, being a dyad if there's two people involved, and you hopefully both have strengths and both have weaknesses, but you're working together to get to whatever it is goal that you're aiming for.
Yeah. So
And
then,
it evolves over time as well.
is the goal then, I guess, essentially to break down what are the elements and not like how can you fast track them, but I think in the context of collegiate athletes, if you're only with an athlete for 3 years or 4 years and it's going to take you 2.5 to 3 years to kind of build that kind of prolonged extension like you mentioned earlier, does that mean really that they're only like that relationship is only peaking for that final year, or is the whole point of the research how can we condense what would normally take 2 to 3 years so that we can have kind of the exponential result for the extended period of time?
Yeah, there's kind of two things within that question. And the first thing is within the collegiate system, you're handbraked by not only the set time that you have the athlete, whereas if you work in like an open-ended system, you could be the coach there for 10, 15 years. But in the collegiate system, it's a maximum of 4 years. But you also get hamstrung by the NCAA in that during an off season, you're only allowed to contact the athlete 8 hours a week. So all coaching is capped at 8 hours per week.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in the in season, all coaching is capped at 20 hours per week. So you can't communicate with your athletes outside of that time that you're with them, because then it starts to eat into other coaching time. And skills pay the bills. So there's always going to be strength conditioning is going to go further and further down that prioritization or that priority ladder. But then in what essentially our goal is to put this, what we're studying, and to put what we're finding into education, so that if you get your ASCA, if you're Australian, if you get your NSCA, CSCS, if you're American, you go through the UK SCA in the UK, you go do a university degree that has any element of sport performance within it, there's going to be some education within the coach-athlete relationship. And at the moment, it's pretty non-existent. There's like, if you look at the certifications, and S&C itself is an interesting area because it's only just starting to become a requirement to get a job to have a master's degree. Before that, it was a certification which you could get in a very short period of time. Within that certification, there might have been 2 or 3 slides on coach-athlete relationship, but there's 200 on bigger, stronger, faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's interesting, and I kind of had this light bulb moment not long ago, was that the coach-athlete relationship is the medium or the pathway that everything else has to flow through. So it doesn't really matter where you fit. If you're the speed coach, you're the rehab coach, like whatever it is. You got a visitor in the background there.
They got a little gremlin just wanting to come in. Oh, here they come. Yeah. Sorry, man.
There's the future athlete right there.
That's right.
And so that everything has to go through that medium. So the better we can get that medium, then the next generation of coaches are going to be better, and then they can feed into that loop, and the next generation of coaches can be better. So it kind of does come 360 degrees in that we're trying to, what we have to research up here, get it into publication, get it into that academic world, then can be accessed and plugged into the bottom, where we can have club coaches who are never going to go to university look at what we've done and not so much fast track, but have a better quality relationship. If we can say these are the 10 or 12 things that are most important that a coach has to do, and we can give them to young coaches, then hopefully they have success within what it is they deem as success. And that's another area in coach-athlete relationship is going back to the start is, well, what do you want? And
Yeah.
there has to again be that mutual understanding of are you trying to win a Super Bowl or are you trying to have fun with your mates on a Thursday night? And the way that you coach those two outcomes is very different.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost it almost sounds like you're trying to essentially reverse engineer what I imagine like the kind of old school metric was. It's bigger, faster, stronger because if you demonstrate that you can get me bigger, faster, stronger, then I'm instinctively going to trust that you're the person to get me there, right? Or if I see some decent results quite quickly, increases the buy-in, increases the trust, increases the relationship. Is that?
Yeah. So the technical name for that's called a performance cohesion loop,
Okay.
and it's very evident within strength conditioning, but particularly latter stage rehab, where if you get an athlete who's had a potential career-ending injury, and they go through a year rehab, like whatever it is, to get back to the team, you can get them back to their original performance standard or gets them selected back for the team, whatever that is. If the players around that can see that player has gone from like such devastation to back to performing, the players around that also buy into you as a coach as well. So that's that performance cohesion loop. You increase performance, players believe in you, you increase performance.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the old all this sort of to sort of summarize everything we do. I've read this from, I think it was Mike Boyle, but this is going back 20 years now, and it's the perfect, something along the lines of the perfect program done poorly is beaten by the worst program done perfectly. That's paraphrased, probably bastardized, but
Yeah.
when you listen to this, but it's that's the point of it, is that if the better the athletes believe into what it is that whatever you're delivering, the better the performance is. The better their performance is, the better they believe in you, and it just creates that loop.
Yeah. It's almost like what you'd call like placebo to an effect, right?
Yeah. There's definitely a belief factor.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And I think we kind of see that too. I think definitely as a coach and going from being a PT where you do get, there's actually a study, I think it came out of Ohio University, where they looked at high intensity activity in particular and why people would identify with their gyms essentially more than they would like their church or other kind of like spiritual institution. And what they found was after a bout of extreme exercise, the irrational brain spends a little bit of time offline. So it's kind of inhibited as it would be like if you'd had a couple of drinks. And so what they were finding was doing like this higher intensity activity and doing it with other people, that kind of 10-15 minutes post that workout where you're able to have more meaningful connection, even if it's just about the workout you've just done with those people around you, strengthen those bonds and essentially builds that like sense of community within a group like that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's mutual understanding through suffering.
Yeah.
And it's the same with like if you I do a little bit of reading in sort of productivity, flow state, sort of those areas. And there's a bit of research that's been done in group flow, and SEALs are the most common group that's kind of talked about within those states. And a lot of that ability to go through, whether it's like raiding a compound, capturing a terrorist, whatever it is that they're doing, that they can do that without words. And all of that comes back to them going through that initial training and that hell week where they're broken down as people, but they can bond together through that suffering, and then that gets expressed later on, knowing that they've been through the worst of the worst together, that they can do anything as a team.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, there's a metric on the SEALs where it's like level of skill and like level of reliability, and it's the perfect SEAL isn't necessarily the one with the best skill if they've got like low relatability with the rest of their crew because they can't be trusted, and it actually worstens the crew even if they're technically amazing operators.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Definitely.
So what are the big pillars then? Like you mentioned 10 or 12. Don't have to reel them all off if you. But If for someone like myself, obviously wanting to talk to other coaches is a big part of bettering myself as a coach. And so when you're looking to work with a new group, or you're the new person into an existing group culture, like what are the things that you can actively be doing to encourage that?
Yeah, so I had an experience a couple of years back where I came into a state level team round 5 of their competition as I was head of strength and conditioning and rehabilitation or something along those lines. And that's a really different environment to walk into an established environment and have them try and look at you as the person to take them forward versus being able to do like at least a pre-season with them and be able to build that relationship from everyone's kind of resetting. This is a new person. Let's sort of build this together to going, everyone else is established. You're the new guy, get in there and get it done. And that's a very different environment to tackle. So what I think a lot of it comes down to is knowing yourself. So like a lot of introspection on knowing yourself and developing a coaching philosophy. And if you can know that philosophy, then that helps make your decisions a lot easier. And then when I went into that environment that was already established, the first thing I did was meet with the leadership group because I had about 70 odd players that I was dealing with. So once I was, selected as the person to come and do the job, I sat down with the leaders and I was like, all right, well, where are we going? Like, what's the team plan? Because it's I have a philosophy, but if it's misaligned with the team outcomes, then we're not going to gel. We're not going to be able to work together to get to that outcome. So rather than try and get 70 people on board, if I can get the leaders on board, then everyone else will follow them. There's a reason why they're leaders.
Mhm.
So mutual goal setting, is we kind of touched on this earlier, but mutual goal setting is super important. Um, Being able to go into a group and go, this is like, what do you want? Like, where are we going? And then, okay, this is my philosophy. This is how I plan to get there. And then being able to be adaptable into taking what that you're the expert within that area, and being able to adapt that to their specific goals. And if you can get buy-in with them, then everyone else will follow.
Yeah. Do you feel like that tends to be the so what I'm looking for? Like even if you're not specifically in a team environment, and even if you don't specifically have elected leaders within a group, that there is sort of that existing hierarchy within kind of every community of people.
Yeah, I definitely do. Like in like just a traditional sort of gym environment, or there's definitely going to be leaders and people that people look up to. And part of like one of the things that we can do from a leadership perspective as a performance coach, if we are working with um, people who sort of we need to lead to achieve a goal, is show them how we do what we've told them to do. And you can show, like, if you're working within a group, if you're doing what you've told them to do, they will build buy-in. If they can have like someone who, like in your background in sort of that CrossFit area, if you have someone in there doing the workouts that you're giving everyone else, they're automatically going to move towards that person as a leader within that group.
Yeah. And is that, I guess, leverages on that kind of mutual suffering, right?
So yeah, so like one thing that I'll be remiss to say at sort of at some point today, but I'll say it now. One thing that can really, actually, I'll say two things. One thing that can really throw off a group, and you can lose the group, like lose that buy-in, is workouts should never be punishments.
Yeah.
And that's a really fast way of losing people. And a lot of it still exists with a lot of old school coaches because that's what they did, and that's they don't look as conditioning as preparation for whatever it is that they're trying to do, like your energy system development or injury prevention, whatever it is. They go like, okay, let's make them throw up, or let's because they played badly on the weekend, so let's smash them on Tuesday night. That doesn't help buy-in.
Yeah.
That does the opposite.
Yeah. I think that used to be like definitely when I first started PT was like that was kind of how you demonstrated value was like I can make this harder and make you hurt more than if you would have just kind of come in here on your own and do this, right?
Yeah, it's a very I think we've all been through that where I wouldn't necessarily say a goal of mine was ever, oh, if my client doesn't throw up, well then they haven't worked hard enough, or they can't walk for 3 days and I need to train them harder. But I've kind of had it the opposite where I was lucky that I learned from good coaches early on, and I would train people with a long-term goal of, whatever. Once you understand periodization, it's like, right, 18, 12, 24 weeks, whatever it is, and you got like a long-term view of getting them there. And they come in and they're like, oh, I'm not sore, or I don't feel like I trained hard yesterday. And being able to sell that bigger picture is super important. I think that's a really big difference from in that like early stage, like personal trainers going out into the sort of that business is the big difference between good PTs and great PTs is good PTs, and probably good PTs probably a little bit overselling it, but they're only designing programs for today, and
Yeah.
that's like, okay, my client's coming in at 4 o'clock. What am I getting them to do? Okay, this, and this. But a great PT is going to be, well, all right, well, what I do today is going to affect them in 3 days' time. And this week's going to affect them over the next month. Next month's going to affect them over the next 3 months. And working backwards from where can we take them safely
Hmm.
and slowly, which is hopefully something that they're able to then prolong for a long period of time rather than smash them and then be like, oh, I got smashed. I feel really good. And then they don't last 2 or 3 weeks and wonder why they get injured.
Yeah, it's definitely a delicate line, and I think that we see too, particularly in the CrossFit space, that it's harder to sell the like technical classes and the like come in and let's just work on your Olympic lifting technique for an hour, right? When a lot of people do measure how effective a workout's been on like how bad they need to change their t-shirt after they're done, right? Or how much they're just exhausted at the end of it. But I guess again, that's your role as a coach is to like educate and be like, well, if this is what you want at the end, this is what you have to do to get there, right?
It's a pretty like you said, it's a fine line. The the hard part is definitely like part of your job as a coach is to take people beyond where they think they can go.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have to be like miles and miles past that. That can just push them to the edge and then bring them back, and then push them to the edge and then bring them back. And as they adapt, it's going to be a slow build versus going, well, we're going to smash them and then they're going to come back or they're not. But that I've I've certainly had like people on the way that, and this goes at all levels. You're only with your client for 4 hours a week, say. So that's 164 hours for them to undo everything you've done with them within that 4 hours. So you've got like that. It's not, if you get a client and you're training them and you're like, right, this is a technical session. We're going to work on your technique of Olympic lifts. How do you know that they haven't stopped on the way home and done 10 sprints that they vomited, or gone to another gym the next day and done something else? But then they don't tell you because they don't want you to know, and then you end up getting the blame for something when their volume's 300% more than what it should be.
Yeah. 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 Man, I hope my clients aren't doing that. I don't think they are.
It's pretty interesting. Like I kind of you read about like what Michael Jordan did. He's probably the highest profile player, and because you have like with the Chicago Bulls, you had strength coaches and athletic trainers, and you had people in that system. And he went out and got his own trainer and his own people. And Tim Grover's quite well known now. He also worked with Kobe. He's got a couple of books out. And Jordan went away from like what the team was doing and did his own thing. And that would have been a really interesting environment to have been on, a fly on the wall at the time, because it's Michael Jordan. Like, what are you going to say?
Yeah.
Like, I got a mate of mine who works in high level soccer. He's in the Major League Soccer, the MLS in America, and soccer players are notorious, football, the world game for the European listeners, the notorious for not doing strength training.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you working with Ronaldo or Messi, and they're like, no, I'm not going to go lift that weight. It's like, what are you going to do? There's a million strength coaches, but there's only one Messi or one Ronaldo. So it's really interesting to have all this knowledge and have all this um, like leadership and all these people and positions in places. And the actual club is like, yeah, but that's Jordan. Jordan can go and do what Jordan wants. It's pretty to have that success, but to still have people doing their own thing along or the way is um, really interesting environment to look into. So there's people who are you Jordans of the world that go outside of what they're told to do and still have success, but there's only one Michael Jordan. So it's not a recommendation for the the 99.9% of us that are mere mortals. It's one thing that I do, the conversation I kind of do have with people is if they do go outside of what I prescribe for them is, well, what do you do for a job? Like, I'm a plumber, I'm an electrician, I'm a banker, like whatever it is. It's like, well, I'm not going to come to your building site and tell you how to run pipes. So that's your expertise, and I will respect that and pay you to do that. And it has to come the other way. You've employed me as your coach, and you need to do what I tell you to do in terms of that pathway, but it has to be in a way that is neutral to the athlete. It's a hard conversation to have,
Yeah.
but it has to be delivered in a way that is mutually agreeable. And they can go the other way. Like we'll talk a little bit about buying, a little bit of trust, things like that. Well, the coach doesn't always trust the athlete either.
Yeah. Do you think, from a coaching perspective, having someone like a Jordan or a Ronaldo, how would you have to set that up with a I don't know, a tough conversation, or would you just
I can tell you how
what would the research indicate? How would the research indicate?
well, I think in science there's always outliers, so I don't. I think you just put your Ronaldos and your Messis of the world and your Jordans and your Kobe's and just go, no, other outliers. Let's just deal with people that we can actually deal with.
Yeah.
What my mate did in the States was it basically strength training was optional for the first team. So the team that you see on TV, strength training was optional, but it was compulsory for the seconds. So he would work with the twos, and then as the twos went up into the senior side or into the ones, they would continue their strength training because they've seen the benefits of it. And then other people would then kind of start to join in a little bit. But then by the time that the senior team had moved on, retired, whatever it was, you've now got people that have come up through the system, through the twos into the ones that see the value in strength training and maintain it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, the like the seasonal changes too, like pre-season versus off-season versus like during the season and stuff like that when it comes to the specifics of training as well. But I guess then as well, you're also during season probably going to see more injuries and stuff that require more rehab, and that gives you a gateway into functional activity as well.
Yeah, it's like goes back to like even session by session, because if you're running a technical session, your energy and your volume is going to be calm and instructional. If you're doing like a 1 RM session, then your energy is going to be high, your volume is going to be high, you're going to have a lot of noise and all that around, and that is going to help that environment. But that's even session by session. That's not even like training blocks in terms of like pre-seasons and things like that. But yeah, as you go along, you get groups within groups. So you have your team, and then within the team you have like the injury group or the rehab group, whatever it is, and then there's only 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah.
They're the opportunities for coaches to get to know athletes, to get to know them as people during those one-on-one time they can have. And what do you do outside of cricket, outside of whatever it is the sport is? That's probably one of the most important questions you can ask. What if you find out whatever their hobbies are, and you take an interest in that, and then every time you see them, you talk to them about their hobbies, you talk about things they're interested in beyond their sport. Actually, you actually care. You're not just asking it because some guy on a podcast told you to do it.
Yeah.
You actually take care of the athlete. You actually care about what they do because people can smell bullshit a long way away. So if you actually give a shit, if you go about 360 degrees, if you don't give a shit about people, you're probably in the wrong profession.
Yeah.
Coaching is a very caring environment, a nurturing environment, and you have to take that responsibility on if you decide to be a coach. And those are the things that are important, like knowing what your clients are doing, and then over time, they'll hopefully open up to you, and you go back to that trust where, I've got, again, I'll refer back to Marty. He had in the elite system, so he's been through multiple elite systems, and you have like surveys that players wake up, they have wellness surveys, how did you sleep, how's your appetite, things like that, and they fill it out. Then that goes to a server, and the performance staff get that collated from everyone that's put the information in, and the club comes to training. The most effective thing you can do is ask an athlete, how are you going? And hopefully you have that trust within them, but that they can say, look, coach, I'm a bit sore, or I'm not feeling it today, versus looking at collated data or numbers going, well, this person, like, they're fine, let's smash them, when they're like, I'm going through some stuff at home, like I'm not really feeling up to it today. Coach, if you have that level of understanding, you can personalize the session. And that actually is one of the, you mentioned pillars before. One of the most important pillars in the coach-athlete relationship is individualization.
Yeah.
And being able to, communicate individually with clients or with athletes, because some athletes need a hug, some athletes need a kick in the ass, and you need to get them right. If you don't, you lose the whole team. But also then that can change sort of session by session as well. And being able to have that trust with an athlete to say, look, I'm not feeling it. And you go to them, okay, I'm going to pull you out of the group, and I'm going to, we're going to just do a warm up today, or we're just going to do some run throughs, or whatever it is that keeps them in that space, but doesn't push them beyond their capability of the day, or what they feel they're capable of today, can go a long way to building that performance cohesion loop.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see that more and more. I think we're starting to encourage people. We're talking about percentage of back squat percentages for your strength work, but don't use your lifetime 1RM. Use like what feels heavy for today and work off that.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. It's more of like a session RPE than an actual like lifetime RPE.
Yeah.
But you wake up like you've got a child now. There's going to be nights where you don't sleep, and you're not going to feel like going in the morning and setting a 1RM. Well, you're still going to train hard, but maybe it's a heavy triple today rather than a heavy single. Maybe it's, I'm just going to go and do like my main lift and go home. Like whatever it is, there's nothing wrong with any of those things. It's just being able to go session RPE. For me, if my lifetime squat was say 100 kilos, and I'm not feeling it today, my RPE of a 10 today might be 70 kilos. I still hit an RPE of 10. It's just a session RPE, I didn't get 105 today. It was like, I'm feeling like terrible. This is the best I can do today.
Yeah. And is it effective enough, say in a group scenario, to just have like a kind of 30-second, 1 minute, 2 minute chat just with each person, either on the way in, kind of while they're resting between sets, something like that, but just kind of getting around? Is that enough to be establishing like what you're talking about?
It's probably not enough, but it is if it's reiterating things you've already talked about. So any touch points better than no touch points whatsoever.
Yeah.
But being able to have, and again, like it's kind of, when we look at these relationships, there's kind of three factors. You've got the coach's knowledge. You've got the athlete and how they want that knowledge delivered to them. And then you've got the situation. And the situation is variable, the athlete's variable, and the coach is variable. So that's kind of the hard part, is a balancing act of all those three. and being able to have like finding those times, whether it's 5 minutes, whether it's whether it's a team barbecue that you can go to, and one of the big things that we kind of haven't touched on yet, but is taking the time to spend time with the athlete outside of that environment and saying, if you do get that athlete that comes in and is like, look, coach, I'm feeling terrible, I'm not up for it today. You saying to them, no problem, let's go get a coffee, may be more effective training session in the long term
Yeah.
than going, well, let's just see what you can get done. Like taking the athlete out of that environment and spending one-on-one time with them, even if it's not talking about their issues or their problems, assuming they have some, it's not just physical injury, but that may be take them out of that negative space that they're in for an hour, and that may be just talking to someone. That may be the thing that athlete needs at that day at that time.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's like that other kind of tricky line too, right? Where you want your performance center or facility to be a place where the kind of standard is that we're working hard, but at the same time you don't want someone who's had like an average day to be just like, I can't do it today, it's too hard,
Yeah,
right?
and
Yeah,
that's a super hard part about elite sport is they have that super person and persona where they're elite athletes and everyone's looking up to them and I have to train hard, not even get hard because I skip session, things like that. And then that can be what breaks the athlete,
yeah.
whether that's physically or mentally.
Yeah. So when you're like doing the research and stuff like that from an academic point of view, is that done via surveys? Are you using your own kind of like athletes that you're working with and saying, hey, you guys, congratulations, you're now my guinea pigs for this thing I'm doing?
Not really. There are restrictions within ethics of being able to ask who you know to be able to do things, and it's super. There's obviously there's loopholes with everything, but it'll be things like in a gym, I can't ask an athlete to participate in my survey, but I can put a poster on the wall and they can look at the poster and contact me and ask me questions. But I can't directly ask them, but they can directly ask me
Yeah.
after they've been, it has to be their decision within, and each country's ethics are a little bit different. But to kind of answer the question from a technical point of view, what we had to do was basically take historical sport coaching knowledge. Um, I'll take a step back for a second. For where we're going, we have to kind of have steps in place and a pathway to move along. And the first thing within academia is generally looking at the body of knowledge and going, this is where we're at. So whether that's you take like Australian rules football, but for women at the moment, ACL injuries, hamstring injuries are in AFL in general, they're the most prevalent injuries, but more so within females. But we don't have that historical knowledge because the sport's so young. So we have to look at what's happening within the AFL males because that's the sport, that's the link between the two, and then go, well, what's working, what's not working. Let's try this within this population and find out. But there's no body of knowledge within that, so you've got to borrow it from other places.
Yeah.
So what we had to do with where we're going, because like I said, no one's really done the strength coach athlete specific area of the coaching athlete relationship or that specific context. So we had to look at historical sport coaching and go through, okay, this is what they've done from the 1970s. Sport coaching research started in the 1970s. And it's kind of each decade, there's been a little bit of evolution as we've gone along. So we had to look at that and go, okay, this is what we know within sport. And then over here, athletes have told us for a long time that strength and conditioning is important, but no one's merged those two areas. So our first study or our first was like a review of the knowledge and going, there is none. So
Yeah.
we have to then present that to the academic world and go, this is the hole. Now we're going to try and fill the hole. So stage one was, this is what's missing. Stage two is building that foundation of, well, what do we know? So the thing that's a little bit different that I'm doing that other people haven't done is I'm coming specifically from the athlete's perspective. So I'm going to the athletes going, what is important to you? What do you need from your coach versus going to the coaches saying, well, what are you doing that's working? So I'm going sort of bottom up. So then the second study that we did was we interviewed a dozen athletes, borrowing from the knowledge we had from the sport coaching world. So there's tools within sport coaching, and by sport coaching, just to reiterate, I mean like basketball coaches, football coaches, soccer coaches, anything along those lines. So the sport coaching itself, or the coaching of the sport. We borrow from those tools and go, okay, these are the questions that were asked. These are evidence-based questions. They've been tested. They've proven to be valid, reliable, and all the important things within scientific testing. That will change the context from the word sport coach to strength conditioning coach or athletic performance coach or sport performance coach, whatever terminology you want to use. And then we interview the athletes and we talk to them. So we ended up with about a 21 question survey. And then from there, we then had 21 athletes. So 12 athletes answer not all the questions, but most of them would have answered 18 to 21 of them. And they would have indirectly answered the other 3 questions through another question. So then we have a basis, like a baseline level of knowledge going, okay, this is the foundational of what's important to them. And then we looked at coaches and we looked at what was important factors for them in building relationships. And we looked at some historic stuff with that. And now we're moving on to a quantifiable study. So we're our first, the interviews were qualitative, so we're building concepts. And now we're using a larger amount of data to try and correlate and prove those concepts and also give us a pool of data that we can look into specific areas. So to do that is where we would go into surveys and be like, okay, here's a survey that we've worked. And again, because there's no body of knowledge in this area, we've had to borrow from sport coaching surveys. You know, can you, as the athletes, please answer this? And then when they answer those, we then get data points and we look at the data points and go, there is a large amount of data within this space and there's hardly anything within this space. And then from that, you can either look at it from 2 ways. You can either go, this is our hypothesis and does the data support that or not? Or you can look at the data and go, this is what's been shown by the data, and then back, like reverse engineering and looking at it from backwards point of view.
Yeah.
So where we're at now is that, and obviously COVID's a bit of a handbrake, but we're in that data collection phase now where we're trying to get, we'd like to get between 400 to 600 athletes and have them give us what's important to them from their perspective, and then we can then like loop that back into the coaching world.
Do you find that regardless of the sport that the answers seem to be similar from like what the data's telling you, or is there like a sport specific element in terms of certain sports that more so looking at this than that?
Yeah, I'll like I'm as a person I'm fairly direct, but I can't really answer that question directly because I can't prove it yet.
Yeah.
What we can hypothesize is collision-based sports have a higher appreciation of strength and conditioning, and that kind of makes sense from an anecdotal point of view.
Yeah.
And then there's also differences between male and female perspectives, and one really like historically interesting point, and I expect this to change, is sort of as we evolve as humans, is males prefer male strength conditioning coaches, females don't care. So that, like the gender and the sex is an interesting space, and it's just, for me, it's just because historically a lot of those sports, and Australian rules football is obviously quite well known to us in Australia, and the AFLW being quite young. When AFLW started, there were no female AFLW coaches because the males it's been a male sport for 150 years.
Yeah.
So the males played it. When I grew up, the females weren't allowed to play after 12 years old. And now we're starting to see female coaches come the whole way through the system. But historically, it's been male coaches in male-only sport. American football is like only males play that at the highest level. There's no NFLW. So what over time that'll change, but historically it's been, and I just think it's because of experience. I just think it's because it's time within those environments that only males have done it. So it's not a matter of, I don't think it's a matter of not trusting, but it's a matter of just not knowing. I've never had a female strength coach before, and I've been playing this sport for 20 years. We'll just, as we all know, people will stick to what they know and what's worked for them in the past. So
Yeah.
I think for young male athletes, it's more of a case of what do they know? Better the devil they know than they don't. And it is evolving and it is changing. And there's definitely no doubt that female coaches can be as effective as male coaches. They just haven't had the opportunities.
Do you think something like the AFLW is just effective a gateway for players as it is for coaches to be taking that kind of next step into that role, like that profession?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to see. Again, AFLW is so young, but we're going to have female, well, only females can play AFL. We're going to have AFL players who then reach the highest echelons of their sport, and the athletic career is very short, very fickle, but it's not going to change their love for the sport. So the next best thing to being an athlete is being a coach. You're still within the environment that you love. You're still with players. You're still in that high performance space. You're just not the one kicking the goals anymore.
Yeah, and I don't think that'll take that long either because there's already senior players playing. Right, there's already players who are mid-30s, right? And so even though the league's only three, I think it's in its third year, fourth year maybe. There's already going to be a quite a population of players that are pretty close to retirement, albeit the sport's only 3 years old. So
yeah, well, you've got like players like Erin Phillips, who's probably the most high profile. I believe she's 31.
I think she's much older than that, isn't she?
Yeah, but she's in it like what we would classically call it historically, like that athletic window. She's well past that.
Yeah.
And she seems to be, as an outsider, an extremely well respected athlete and an excellent leader. So someone like her, and plus she's got multi-sport experience, is someone who would slide straight into one of those high-level coaching roles. And what I actually think is going to be it's only a matter of time before we have AFLW former players and coaches going the other way, going into the AFL system.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you'll have all this education ready for them, mate, when they take. Well, I guess in that case too, like we've talked about time and stuff like that, and if you're moving someone like an Erin Phillips from the field, and now she's part of like a whether it be strength and conditioning or she's taking on some other responsibilities at the club, you would imagine she'd already still have all that buy-in that she'd accumulated with over 4 or 5 pretty well respected, lots of accolades as a player into that new role too, right? Yeah, so arguably it would be easy there,
Yeah. There's definitely a perception of ability in terms of like buying, and that's definitely kind of a side area that my research will go into, is motivational climates or environments as by themselves. Like, how do we create them? But also the buy-in side of things is in how do I get my athlete to buy into what we're trying to develop as a team. But the point is that it's not unidirectional. It's not the coach going my way. It's being, all right, this is what I do. This is my philosophy. This is what works as from the coaching perspective. How do I adapt this for the athlete or the athletic group that is in front of me?
Yeah. It's interesting when you say that too, because I think we are, and sort of staying on AFL, and I'm a big AFL head, so it's an easy one to talk about. But you do actually see coaches like, say, Nathan Buckley, right, where you could tell over the last couple of years, even the way that he would speak at press conferences and stuff like that, that he kind of came into this space where I'm not necessarily coaching a football club so much as I'm working to develop the character of young men. And if I can develop the character of young men, that will hold us in good stead on the football field, right?
Like probably the most well-known coach of all time is John Wooden, and that's basically his philosophy. That's basically what he did, was take young men and build their character. And then over time, over that 4 years that he had them, he would hope that they would go on. And his goal, like reading some of his books, his goal was never to win championships. It was to build men of good character. And that loop that he was able to create, and that that interest that he took in their life and what they wanted to do, and their way of paying him back was the athletic success that they had. And I think I can't remember, he won 17 or 19 NCAA championships or whatever he won, but the winningest coach of all time in collegiate sport.
Yeah.
And it was never about it was about building those people, versus what do I need to do to become to win championships. Almost like the other way around, where build the people and then championships will come.
Well, I guess it goes full circle, right? Because it's the highest demonstration that you're interested in someone more than their physical ability or like their, performance ability.
Yeah, absolutely. And the collegiate system is a really interesting space as well, because of the way that like recruiting's done, and the recruiting process, and um, the elite universities that are the ones that players want to go to, whether it's based on the historical um, winning percentages or whatever the motivation is to go to those universities. The the what was your question again? I kind of went down a pathway there. What was the
No, it wasn't a question. It was just a statement. I was just saying that more when you do build in the character, you kind of demonstrating to that player that you're interested in them more than just what they're physically capable of doing.
Yeah, so what the path I was going down was that a lot of the times that the coach, so like your Woodens, the recruiters have already got the best players in the country to
Yeah.
come there. So in terms of their physical abilities and their skill levels, they're already elite. And then they come to John Wooden, and then he can develop their character. So they've already got a skill set going in there, and it's the best teenage athletes in the world. They've already got that going in there, and then he has to nurture that to take them to the next level and to build them into people.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's actually like it's a really interesting space in like I teach at universities here, and there's a big difference between American university and Australian university, but you're still working with 18 and 22-year-olds, and it's a really interesting environment because it's really the first time that they've been away from home, and particularly America, but also in Australia, you have students coming in from the country, and they're living away from their parents for the first time, and they've got an opportunity to evolve as a person and they don't have to be who they were in their town or where they come from or who they were in their high school. Now they're starting to evolve as people. And in the American system, more so than the Australian system, is they will move whatever state they need to move to for the best opportunity, whether that is sporting related or it is career related. Different universities have different strengths. So if you're like on the West Coast, but the best opportunity for your university is on the East Coast, well, you turn 18 and move to the East Coast. Like,
Hmm.
that's what it is. So you've gone from being, a 17-year-old in your hometown living with your parents to the other side of the country where you know no one, but everyone around you is in the same boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Crying out for a good coach.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully the university's got good coaches already, but yeah, it's a pretty like that 18 to 22-year-old. Um, you do forget sometimes within your role at the university is that they're 18, and we're like, this is what university expects of you. But even when I went back to uni, I was 27. I hadn't done anything for 10 years, and it took me a whole semester to learn how to learn again.
Yeah.
And one advantage that young students have if they go straight from high school to university is they know how to learn. Like that ability and that skill set's fresh. Then, but they don't have a lot of the worldly skills and worldly experiences that a mature age student has. Mature age students go the other way, where they've got that worldly experience that they can adapt. They know how to manage their time. They know how to prioritize, but they don't know, their actual academic results may not be great, especially in that first period of time, is because they could be 5, 10, 20 years out of school.
You also, I think, when you're a mature age student, though, like actively making that decision to specifically go and do a particular degree or a particular course for a specific reason, right? Whereas, like, when I feel you're like 18, it's like, oh, this is what I got into, or this is kind of what I think I want to do. But again, you have no like life experience really to base that decision on.
No. And that's like some of the conversations that I have with students, particularly the young ones, is like, they finish high school, like, I don't know what to do with my life, but I like sports, so I'll go to a sports science degree. And
Yeah.
there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it's okay if they get to the end of that degree and go, you know what, this isn't for me. It's like students, one of the biggest struggles that I have as an academic working within universities is the population that you're with lacks foresight, and that's comes with age and comes with maturity. But you've got 18-year-olds, and they think that what they do at that point in time is going to be the rest of their life, but it doesn't have to be. You can do a degree, go, no, this isn't for me, and go to another degree in 10, 15 years time. You can start a family and come back when when your kids moved out of house when they're 20.
Yeah.
So there's no right, you don't have to go when, straight out of high school. You can come in at other times. But what you said is spot on. My actual academic results after the first semester were really good because it was something I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it took me 10 years to work that out. And then once I was like, this is what I want to do, how do I get there? I just did whatever it took to get there. But I needed to know where I was going. And that for me took till I was 27. Other people, different stages of their career. I've taught a student of mine was in their 50s, and they went, like, their children left home. They were basically they'd done all their work and they were moving towards their twilight career, and their twilight career for them was a basketball coach. They had a little bit of time, knew they wanted to become a better basketball coach. They went and studied a coaching degree.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Different motivations, everyone. But yeah, it's like, as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, there's, the degree is not necessarily like what you're going to do for the rest of your life, but it's also difficult to say, like, you want to, like, an EP pathway, for example. If you want to go and be an EP, you do your bachelor degree, you do your master's degree, and then you start to become an EP, and you're like, maybe this isn't for me. That's 7 years of your life that you don't have anymore. But you get it's super important to know, and again, I think this comes with time, is knowing what you don't want is half a life. And you would rather, like, know you tried it and it didn't work than always wonder. Even like at the collegiate system in America, for me, my goal was to get there when I was about 24, 25. Got there when I was 31. Got there and I was like, no, this isn't for me anymore. But if I hadn't gone there, and I wouldn't have known. It was a very expensive lesson, but it's
The best lessons always are.
unfortunately. But yeah, it's even like, I don't want students to get to the end of their degree and go, this isn't for me, and feel like they've wasted their time, because you've built friendships, you've built relationships, you've built skill sets that then, like, take you outside of what you've done. And like, a lot of the things you learn in a degree aren't necessarily related to that degree, but they help you understand how other things work.
Yeah. You'd be a big fan of like Last Chance U and that sort of stuff on Netflix, wouldn't you?
I haven't actually seen it. It's on my list, but
Yeah.
I haven't gotten to it yet. I've actually there's a couple of old clips from similar shows along the years that I have played in sport coaching classes, and kind of set up debates of, like, you've got like a really nice coach and a really, like, mean coach. It's like, let's debate, like, which is more effective. So, but yeah, I've seen a few clips of Last Chance U along the way, but I haven't sat down and watched the whole thing yet.
Easy. You'd enjoy it. You definitely enjoy it. It talks about exactly that, and I guess given the particular like demographic as well, that the specific universities they choose within like the JUCO system, it kind of just plays into a lot of what we've been chatting about, like how much that like off-field stuff is integral, really.
Well, like as we kind of mentioned before, if you did 2 1 hour training sessions a week and 1 2 hour game on a weekend, that's 4 hours of your week. That's 164 hours to do other things.
Yeah.
So you look at like the actual time frame that you spend doing what you do. There's not a massive amount of time in your total week spent exhibiting or expressing those skills.
Yeah. Yeah. Easy, mate. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this chat. I'm also conscious of taking up a heap of your morning. But yeah, that was really fun, and I think there's a lot to think about. If there's people that want to follow you, see what you're doing. I know you've got a bit of a podcast on the back shelf as well that's coming
Yeah,
to fruition.
on the way. Yeah, so the podcast will be all the socials for the podcast are going to come under Know the Athlete. So um, KNOWTHEATHLET. I feel like I was just in like an adult spelling bee then. Oh yeah, that's kind of where the podcast is going to be on all the socials. But otherwise, for now, I'm pretty easy to find on Instagram. Just Coach Foulds, so CoachFoulds, and that's where I'll put all the podcast details up there as well.
Perfect. And are there any links if people want to be involved in like any of the research side of things and stuff that you're doing? Is there a way they can?
Not yet, but I will certainly share them with you once they become available. Just ethics. We've got to get through first.
Perfect. Stay tuned.
Exactly.
Awesome. Thanks so much, mate.
No problems, mate.
Cheers. Have a good day.